Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news right away. As United States President Donald Trump continues his state visit to United Kingdom, protests take place in central London. Thousands turn out in opposition to U.S. President and his highly controversial policies. Politicians from the opposition Labour Party as well as the Green Party and various social movements spoke at the rally and expressed their distaste of Trump's being revered with a state visit. They said they don't believe he deserved that honor.
You know, even today he's going to say that he didn't see any protests. There were no protests against him. For us, it's important to keep coming out here and showing that, like, you can keep lying and you can keep saying that there aren't people that disagree with you, but there's an enormous amount of people that want him to know that there are people that disagree with him, and we're going to keep coming out until he gets that message.
Now we have more information regarding this visit from our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete.
Here in central London, thousands of people have come out into the streets to protest Donald Trump, the US president's 3-day visit to the UK. He arrived yesterday at around 9 a.m. and even before arriving, he has caused controversy by tweeting insults to the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who had written an article in the Sunday Observer newspaper likening Trump's rhetoric to that of 20th century fascists. Now, last night, there was a state banquet laid on for him, which was boycotted by the leader of the main opposition party, the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, who is currently speaking on a platform around the corner to the crowd. He has supported today's protest and called on people to support Trump's visit to the UK. So Trump has, 3-day visit has caused controversy, and the people out on the streets today are migrant groups, Latin Americans, and a range of other social movements who are very critical of the fact that he's been afforded such a lavish welcome by the British government and the British state.
Thank you, Pablo. And addressing the anti-Trump protesters, the Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn called for an end to racism, misogyny and religious persecution. He added that mobilizations against political extremism demonstrate the people's determination for positive change.
So I say to our visitors that have arrived this week, think on, please, about a world that is one of peace and disarmament, is one of recognizing the values of all people, is a world that defeats racism, defeats misogyny, defeats the religious hatreds that are being fueled by the far right in politics, in Britain, in Europe and the United States. Do you know what? Together we can make a big difference. Together we can change this world. Together we can bring about that peace and justice. And by our demonstration here today, we've shown just how determined we, all of us, are to achieve that better place and that better world. Thank you for being here today for peace, for justice and disarmament.
Meanwhile, during a joint news conference with outgoing Prime Minister Theresa May, Trump once again took aim at the Mexican government, which he accused of not doing enough to stop what he called an immigrant invasion.
Mexico has something to prove, but I don't want to hear that they're run by the cartels. You understand, you report on it all the time. A lot of people do. That would be a terrible thing. Mexico should step up and stop this onslaught, this invasion into our country.
Trump's comments come just as the Mexican Prime Minister Marcelo Ebrard is in Washington to hold talks on the issue of immigration and the threats of tariffs made by President Trump. Mexico's Foreign Minister says he hopes to find common ground with U.S. officials.
We are going to present a comprehensive vision about tariffs and migration, but the main issue tomorrow is about migration and proposals from Mexico and concerns from the United States, and we are going to find out a common ground, I think.
We're preparing for the scenario that tomorrow we can have a successful negotiation. This is Mexico's hypothesis and what I think will happen. But if we don't reach a negotiation after tomorrow, we could then give you a clearer vision of what Mexico's next steps will be. And we will then see how the U.S. Congress decisions are evolving.
Our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Gestoso, has the details of the news conference where the foreign minister from Mexico expressed those information. Let's hear him. Welcome.
We're at the Mexican embassy in Washington, D.C., where the foreign minister, Marcelo Ebrard, held a news conference earlier in the day. He highlighted two main points related to the meeting he's to hold with the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. First, he said he's confident common ground will be found between the two sides over the controversial threat made by the U.S. government to impose tariffs on Mexican products starting on June the 10th. Ebrard says there's an 80% chance of an agreement to stop these tariffs. Secondly, he highlighted that his team has nearly finished putting together its proposal for Wednesday's talks. For their part, U.S. officials have told the Mexican authorities that they will receive the U.S. proposal a few hours before their meeting. According to Ebrard, Mexican private businesses are fully supporting the government's stance in these talks. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the Washington Post published an article which stated that lawmakers of the Republican Party are discussing having a vote in Congress to undo the proposed tariffs against Mexico, which could be a significant break in the ranks of the Republican Party.
Thank you, Jorge. And like this, we go to a first break here from the South. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account, of course, at Laura P. Telesur. Stay with us. And we are back and we talk about Sudan's military council that has announced it will cancel all previous agreements with the opposition and hold elections within the next 9 months. In a televised statement, the head of the military council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, said they would stop all talk with the opposition alliance, whom he accused of being responsible for the deadlock in negotiations for a transitional government. And the Sudanese opposition have rejected the ruling Transitional Military Council move to cancel all agreements made with the leaders of the popular protests in the country, describing the military actions as counter-revolutionary.
We, in the Forces for the Declaration of Freedom and Change, refute the statement from the leader of Sudan's Transitional Military Council in every detail and also in its form and its content. We consider it as a statement of a coup and a counterattack on the people's revolution. We refute it all from its beginning to the end. We refuse to call for an early election, and we consider the statement of the military council conforms with the counter-revolution and is linked to the interests of the old regime. And therefore, the leader, General Abdel Fattah Burhan, is trying to call for early elections in the presence of the deep state and the control of the National Congress Party and its remnants in some institutions. They want elections to be conducted in the presence of an inappropriate environment for a free and fair election.
Now, to have more details on this information, we have the following report from our correspondent in Northern Africa, Nayara Tardo. Welcome.
The president of the Transitional Military Council announced on Tuesday the suspension of all the agreements reached with protest leaders and asked for elections within 9 months. This was announced after tensions escalated and a bloody repression against protesters on Monday outside the main military headquarters in Khartoum, which left 35 people dead and hundreds of people injured. According to the Sudanese Doctors Central Committee, the protests began at the end of 2018 to reject the rise of prices in basic products and food, and then demanded the resignation of President Omar al-Bashir, who was removed from power by the military on April 11th. Al-Bashir ruled for almost 30 years, and after his removal, the protests continued. Now against the military junta imposed after the coup. Protesters insist that power must be transferred to civilians. Meanwhile, the military has closed the main roads and bridges in the city, and access to internet has been blocked to prevent new protests. The UN Secretary General strongly condemned the excessive use of violence by security forces against protesters. The UN Security Council is set to discuss these tensions, which could grow, as the Professional Association in Sudan, a key member of the Alliance for Freedom and Change, called on the people to protest peacefully on Tuesday, the last day of the holy month of Ramadan, and to pray for the martyrs that died during the protest.
Thank you, Nayara. Now we go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where Ebola cases have exceeded 2,000 according to the World Health Organization. A spokesperson from the organization said increasing insecurity incidents in the country are holding back effective response to the epidemic. Last month, militias attacked a hospital in Butembo City, killing a doctor from Cameroon working for the health agency. The organization has been constantly forced to suspend its activities, sometimes for a few days at a time, giving the virus the chance to spread faster.
Since the beginning of the outbreak, there were 2,008 cases, including 1,346 deaths. So, for example, yesterday there was 7 new cases being detected. The day before it was more than that.
An inquiry into a controversial police unit in Nigeria has recommended that 22 officers should be prosecuted. The panel looking into the special anti-robbery squad found evidence of widespread human rights violations by the police. In addition, the panel recommended that the police pay compensations to the 45 people who complained of police brutality. The president, Muhammadu Buhari, on his social media page shared video footage allegedly showing the aftermath of the police killing of a young man. Now we talk about Mozambique. Culture has long been an important tool for recovering the history of the African continent. Now it's a key part of the people of Mozambique recover from the devastation that left Cyclone Idai in the month of March. Our correspondent Andre Vieira has a special report in this last part of our series, Mozambique, the People Rebuild.
Multilingual, multicultural, and multi-ethnic are just some of the adjectives to describe Mozambique, a country that until 1975 was a Portuguese colony.
When the colonialists were in Mozambique, our traditions were hardly visible because there was very little space to present our culture. Then there was the struggle for national liberation, which lasted 10 years. The colonialists left, Mozambique took control, and that's when our African traditions came to the fore.
This is a country of many different rhythms, colors, dishes, and beliefs. Tradition is at the heart of all of these, and it is strongest in rural communities like this. 43 languages are spoken in Mozambique. In this community, the language is Ndao. The same diversity is expressed in the different kinds of food they grow.
Corn, mangoes, sweet potatoes, cassava, inemba beans, and dete beans, we plant them all here. But this year, the harvest failed because of the drought.
Marabenta and Kizomba are two of the steps practiced by this group of dancers in Beira, the capital of Sofala province. For them, dance is a vehicle of cultural resistance and social cohesion.
After Cyclone Idai struck, some people got very tense and out of control. Some even started stealing. This helps to loosen up the mind.
In the bigger cities too, it's clear how culture has become an essential tool for rebuilding a sense of community after Cyclone Idai left more than 600 people dead in this central region of Mozambique.
We are rehearsing our dances, and then there will be a big party where we will show them all. There are many dances: kizomba, street dancing, traditional dancing, and others.
Capoeira is one cultural expression that crosses continents. This 19-year-old was baptized by his group as Zumbi, an important warrior who led the fight for freedom of Africans enslaved in Brazil.
We have to keep the tradition going, and that's why we practice this, so we don't lose the traditions of our elders, so that we keep them up.
The African continent was the cradle of humanity, and in spite of the huge challenges they face, people here are determined to defend a culture that goes back thousands of years. Being here has given us a chance to learn firsthand about a history we never got taught at school.
Desde la provincia de Sofala, André Vieira y Sebastián Soto, Telesur, Moçambique.
And like this, we go to a second and very short break. Remember that you can also find this and more information on our website, telesur-english.net. And we go now to Chile, where teachers began an indefinite strike after months of failed negotiation with the government as they call for better labor conditions and improvements to public education.
The country awoke to mass protests. These are Chile's teachers, one of the most aggrieved groups under the policies implemented by President Sebastián Piñera's government.
It's fundamental to express our concern about education, our children and the youth, because public education has been totally abandoned.
This translates to
a government that wants to privatize, that insists on turning education into a business. But we, the people and teachers, demand the education be citizens' right.
For years, teachers and students have been fighting alongside each other for a right that had been denied by the military dictatorship.
We call on all social and political organizations committed to defending people's rights to join us in our fight for students' rights, for the improvement of public education, and for all the rights that this capitalist and neoliberal government has trampled upon.
Their rights have been repressed under the disguise of Piñera's project called Safe Classrooms.
We don't want to be harassed anymore, nor do we want to be criminalized outside our schools. Every day, students are being detained. They have been tortured inside police cars and abandoned in parks afterwards. We need this to stop. One of these days, we'll find a dead student, and that's not what we want.
But the president doesn't seem to listen to any of these concerns. It seems that for the right wing, education is a double-edged sword, a rhetorical question that the government answers with the removal of history as a subject from all schools.
Everything that was left behind is being dismantled. Student movements are being criminalized, and now the removal of history is an attack against students' ability to think critically.
Education versus social control. It's been a constant fight between the people and the government in a country scarred by dictatorship.
And we have more information regarding this protest with our correspondent in Santiago, Tiare Valenzuela. Welcome.
An indefinite national strike by teachers has started. From early in the morning, workers have been on the streets, but this has been met by repression from the police, who mainly have been using water cannons. These teachers are not only demanding better wages, but also better strategies to improve public education, which has suffered several blows for many years. They have also rejected reforms presented by President Sebastián Piñera, which promote the privatization of education. Students have also joined the strike, mainly in Santiago, against the Safe Classroom, an initiative which gives school principals the authority to detain students who protest against privatization.
Thank you, Tiare. And the Congress in Peru is debating a motion of confidence presented by the government of President Martín Vizcarra. Vizcarra's Prime Minister Salvador del Solar arrived at the Congress to support the motion. It is part of the president's attempt to push through a package of anti-corruption reforms, which a majority in Congress has been resisting. If the motion is approved, the laws will then be passed. If it isn't, the president could dissolve Congress.
It is urgent that we save our democracy from corruption. It is urgent that we prevent people who are guilty of criminal offenses from representing us. It is urgent to strengthen the political parties, encourage committed citizens to play a part in politics, and make it possible for us as Peruvian citizens once again to trust in our authorities.
And to know more about regarding the vote of the confidence in the Peruvian government, we have the following report from our correspondent Jaime Herrera, who was earlier at the Congress in Lima and sent the following report. Welcome, Jaime.
What is being debated here in the Congress now is of huge interest to the Peruvian population in general, and that is the motion of confidence presented by the government of President Martin Vizcarra. As you'll remember, last year the government called a referendum in which a big majority of Peruvian voters, over 80%, said they agreed with the need to reform both the judicial system and the political system in order to deal with the many cases of corruption in the country. But although that was approved, so far the Congress has made no progress in adopting these reforms. So what the government is doing today is insisting that the Congress approve this motion of confidence, and if it does express its confidence in the administration of President Vizcarra, that would mean it is making a commitment to pass all of these reforms. If it doesn't, then this would be the second time that there's been a vote of no confidence in President Vizcarra, and that means he would have the power to dissolve Congress and call new elections. Now, there are some political groups in Congress who have already said that they will vote against the government's motion of confidence. Among those is the Broad Front group in Congress. And we have with us one of the members of Congress for the Broad Front, Wilbert Rosas. So, Congressman Rosas, why have you decided to vote against this motion?
Although with this confidence motion, the government is putting forward a number of measures that are worthy of our consideration for the reform of the Constitution, it seems to us that these are really just palliative measures. The fundamental issues are not those that are up for discussion at the moment in this constitutional reform. The fundamental question that needs to be addressed in the constitutional reform is the economic question, because the current economic model just allows the rich to get richer while the poor get poorer. They are not discussing the investments in mining that pollutes the environment and harms the population in the mining and oil extraction regions. They are not discussing the damage done to people's health by contamination with heavy metals in those mining centers and in the Amazon basin.
Voting down the confidence motion would give the president the right to dissolve Congress. Are you in agreement with that?
I think we support what the country wants. And what the country wants is that this Congress be closed. Why? Because there is a majority here which not only obstructs legislation and betrays the country, but which governs in the interests of big companies and not in the interests of the people. I think the Peruvian people have realized this, and they want this Congress to be closed down so that a new phase can begin. And that new phase means drawing up a new constitution.
That was Congressman Wilbert Rosas of the Broad Front, which is in favor not only of rejecting the motion of confidence in the government, but also of calling new elections for a new Congress to replace this one that they say should be dissolved. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Jaime. Like this, we come to the end of this brief, but you can continue with Telesur, of course, connecting the global thousands. And next time, thank you for watching.